Welcome back to Listen to Leo. Today I wanted to talk about startups. And I know this isn't directly related to tech, but it's something that I'm pretty passionate about. I've been part of a startup now for a bit over a year. I tried to launch my own startup. I'm constantly building things. And so I wanted to tackle a few misconceptions that people usually have with startups. And I'm going to start with the one that I made when I first started, which was the idea that to be a startup, you needed to raise money. I saw everybody raising all sorts of money, and I said, hey, they can raise for all sorts of stupid ideas, right? Like, I could probably do it too. Actually, I was way more confident than that. It was, I could totally do that. If all of these idiots can raise, I certainly can. I got what I deserve for that one, as I fell flat on my face with my first startup. But I've learned a lot in the process. And so one of the things to really realize is that a startup is a problem discovery machine. And so what I mean by this is, as you're trying to build a startup, your goal should be to validate that a problem exists. That is the first and foremost thing. And this is something that I am saying mostly to remind myself of that. A lot of times you think of a startup and you think, like, I've got to build something. In fact, I was just on a podcast talking about this, and we were talking about this kind of natural inclination for people, especially engineers, to just like build, build, build. I'm going to build this and people will love it. And ultimately, a startup is not a product producing machine. It is a problem validating machine. So when you want to build a startup, your first goal should be to validate that there is a problem and that there's enough of a problem that people will pay you to solve it. And I think this is actually something that people who raise a bunch of money tend to get backwards, because there is this idea that I will just spend all of this money to create as much growth as possible and kind of figure out the problem aspect along the way. And I think that leads to a lot of wasted money in venture capital. In fact, I've been fairly outspoken with my belief that venture capital as a whole is kind of a broken system that is not really focused on making returns so much as it is making headlines. I think a big aspect with that is that the whole design of venture capital requires a single company in a given fund really to return the entire fund, and then kind of everything beyond that is profit. And I don't think that's a great way to go. I think it should be much more focused on validating things through every stage of the business and really doing more focused growth in a lot of ways. But as a startup, your first thing should be to say, okay, I believe that this problem exists. How do I validate that? And as much as I want the validation part to be, I'm just going to build stuff, it really involves talking to people. And again, this is really me telling myself this, so I'm hoping that it will also be helpful for you. Go out and talk to potential users. Ask them about the problems they solve. That is ultimately what a startup is, because once you figure out that there is a problem and you start building for it, the solution emerges over time. It's really easy to think that you have an incredibly clever solution. It's really easy to procrastinate through building, as I was reminded today. And I think it is important to build and ship, but it's very, very important to talk to people. And ultimately, as a startup, like, you want to be solving problems for people. Don't let yourself get clouded by raising money, by doing the stuff that you see in the news, because ultimately that's not what ends up working the best. The things that end up working the best are the companies who solve real problems for real people and use technology to solve those problems at scale. It's not something you realize until you're in the thick of it, but it's so, so important to keep in mind. I think there's a need for people to talk to each other more, not talk to more people. This seems like a weird thing, but with social media, we like to spread our relationships out to where they're very, very thin, high number relationships because, again, this is what VC funded because it is the most beneficial to them. Large numbers of users, large amounts of data, high value. When you're building relationships online, when you're connecting with people, start smaller.
My guest today
Talk to people more.
is Mindset
more
by
in
Dave.
depth.
But absolutely everybody
Do
needs help from
more
themselves.
We see
interviews.
things around us and we're like, oh, that's
This
what
is
I
actually
got to
something
do.
I realized.
Let's be
and
honest,
it
we have
comes
no
down to
clue
why I started
what being an
my
adult
podcast.
actually
I
means.
realized
You
this
look
is
at
something
your
I need
battery
to
on your
learn to
phone.
do.
You're not
so
thinking
I wanted
about
to
it
build up
until it
those
gets to
skills.
about 40%.
If you would
it's like
have
you don't
looked at
look at it
me
every 1%.
3
and go,
years
"Ooh,
ago,
that time I checked my emails,
you
1%.
wouldn't believe that I was the same
better
person. I had no idea how to talk on camera. I had no idea how to go out and talk to people. Now I make it a point of talking to people on a regular basis. Still not great about talking to the right people and getting like actually connected with my users or potential users or the people that I think I'm solving problems for. So I'm going to be focusing more on that, but just the ability to like have small conversations with people you don't know. That is a killer startup skill that I don't think people focus on enough. And people don't focus on it enough because there's a lot of hype in social media and watching big numbers go up. But if you really want to be successful, learn how to talk to people and talk to them about their problems and understand those problems, because when you do that, that's where successful startups come from. So anyway, hope this was interesting. Thought I'd try something a little new. If you look, I actually look a little better in this camera now that I'm using the correct one. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next video.